Coronavirus, maybe homa, pneumonia, mild pneumonia.
Coronavirus najua ikuwa deadly kuliko hata Ebola. Lakini sasa sijasikia cases yote kutoka Afrika kama kuna mtu ameambukizwa. Lakini naona kama kuizuia coronavirus, mimi naona tu wasimamishe hiyo usafiri wa kwenda China for some times. Mpaka hii ugonjwa isibitiwe kwanza, ijulikane kuna dawa, alafu kuna venye wanaweza zuia, ndio sasa hiyo biashara iendelee. Lakini nasikia kuna Waafrika wako huko China. Hao lazima watolewe huko, warudi huko. Juu wakiendelea kukaa huko, maisha yao iko hatarini.
First of all, I know that it originated from China and that it's very deadly. For example, if it comes in as a cold and it's a virus, so you either get a vaccine, which they haven't found yet, or maybe it deteriorates you in a while, and it's airborne.
I know it's in China.
Is it infectious?
Yes, I think it's airborne. So at some point we are at risk kwa sababu sidhani airports zimefungwa. So like people can still fly in and out. So listen, people are very densely populated in airports. So kama ni airborne, any commune it spreads really fast. So if at any point tutakuja Kenya, tutakuwa at risk, na pia vile Nairobi ndo the most populated. So it spread haraka.
Hiyo story si story inaleta shangwe sana, sababu serikali yetu yenyewe kuna students wetu wako huko wengi sana. Nasikia hata juzi nilisikia foreign affairs inaitwa ambassador mwenye ako huko akijaribu kuombea wale wanafunzi wako huko kuhusu hiyo virus, kuhusu coronavirus. So mimi nilikuwa naachi government ichukue hatua, ichukue wale wanafunzi wetu wako huko irudishe wakuje nchini, kwa nchi zingine kama Uganda wametoa watu wao, Tanzania wametoa watu wao, mbona Kenya isifanye hivyo?
I've not known much, though I know it spread through the air and it originated from China. Yeah, apart from that, there's not much information I've gotten to know.
Bwana inatisha, bwana imetrend kila mahali sasa, hata tunashuku pengine hata imefika na hatujui. Mtu kwa sababu hata vile government inasema explain about hiyo coronavirus, hawajatuambia hizo effects zile ziko, pengine hizo signs zile za corona vizuri tuelewe. Maybe hata mimi naweza kuwa sasa na safa hiyo corona na sijui, nikuje nisitukie nimewaambukiza nyinyi pia. Sasa ni ngumu. Sasa inafaa government kuje kwa ground explain hizo nini, pengine ukiona mtu ako na sign kai aweze kupata matibabu haraka.
Ni mtu msilisikia ati unakuwa na headache, alafu mwili inakuwa na joto jingi na mafua, kitu kama homa hivi. Hizo ndio symptoms najua.
And that is what sets pace to our discussion that is coming up right now about coronavirus. This is Health Tuesday. My name is Ram Maguko. If you're just joining us, remember you can be part of this conversation. The hashtag to use on Twitter is Good Morning Kenya. Head over there, tag me at Ram Maguko and at KBC Channel 1. Coronavirus is the discussion. We'll be giving you more details as we continue, but to help us understand more about this, but from a different angle, I'm joined by Beatrice Marshal. She is a global anchor, journalist from the China Global Television Network, also known as CGTN.
Yes, thank you very much for having me on the program.
Karibu sana. It's always a pleasure. And as we talk about this, the latest on coronavirus outbreak, the statistics as we have right now, I'm looking at above 1,800 deaths so far. We have over 72,000 cases that have been confirmed in China. And these figures are worrying. You'll be giving us more as we continue. But I'm wondering what efforts in terms of prevention and control does the Chinese government have that they have put in place to contain the spread of this virus?
So thank you very much again for having me on the program. I'm no expert here, but I want to give you some statistics on the way we have been following this being, a state media and how we've been looking at the coronavirus. Now, let me start by saying, as you've correctly put it, there are over 72,000 cases confirmed. Actually, today, as of February 17th, 72,436 total confirmed cases, 1,862 total deaths. The survivors, though, are 12,552 total survivals. We also need to understand that over the last 12 days, there has been a consecutive decline in the reported number of cases inside China. And if you look at the epicenter of it, actually is Wuhan city, which is in Hubei province. So that is where it is actually concentrated. 1% of this total number of the confirmed is actually outside of this area. So, and if you look at outside of Wuhan, 0.49% of that is the fatality outside of Wuhan. 2.2% in total is the fatality of this coronavirus. But let us just take a step back and see what the Chinese authorities have been doing to try and contain this epidemic. It is a new epidemic. So when it came out in late December, people were not sure what it was, and by the time authorities understood that it is a new strain of a virus, then they immediately went into action and quarantined the area involved, Wuhan area. A lot of people were put under quarantine. What the Chinese authorities also did, they set up hospital specifically designed to treat coronavirus people, and that is they set that up in less than 10 days.
10 days.
Yes.
I'm aware that yesterday they even put, as of yesterday, more than 11.
As of today, they have put up another 11 temporary hospitals to treat specifically only coronavirus patients. And they did not only set up one hospital, they set up two hospitals. One hospital in under 10 days and another one opened shortly after, a few days later. So in total, the government has put up massive efforts. There are other centers that have been set up across the 31 provinces. So it's not only just Wuhan where this is ongoing. And also, people are being encouraged. They've been told what to do. If you feel that you have a fever, you feel that you have a flu, you need to check into hospital immediately. And also, like personally, person to person, how do you need to protect yourself? Medical health professionals have told us, wash your hands constantly, because this is not airborne, this is contagious by touching. So you need to wash your hands constantly. If somebody who has a flu sneezes, you need to cover your mouth. You need you need to protect yourself from that. And because it is spread really through droplets. And also if you sneeze and probably it goes onto a table and somebody else touches that, then that becomes contagious. So those are the sort of ways you can protect yourself.
But I'm coming in from the media perspective. You've been covering this from the ground. This is not one case that we can just say came in a way that someone can say we've not handled viruses before, because we've had other previous cases of viruses that we've had in the past. Comparing it with how we are handling this now, do you think that we were ready for such kind of a case? Remember, we had the H1N1, so many viruses that were there in the past from back in the 90s.
In terms of how the Chinese authorities have set up the hospitals, they've learned a lot from the SARS epidemic. And the kind of hospitals that they're setting up now has better technology, is designed to even ensure that medical personnel are not infected, that the wards are so enclosed that medical personnel are not infected. So there's a lot of technology that has been put into place to ensure that within those hospitals themselves, the patients are well taken care of, the medical personnel are well taken care of. So there are lessons that have been learned from
previous
viruses, right? And you rightly point out that we've had these viruses, since 1967. And if I just look at the one you mentioned, the H1N1, which was an epidemic that started in 2009, there were 1.6 million, over 1.6 million cases. There were 284,500 deaths. That was a 17.4% fatality rate. So we've had that as well. If you look at the H7N9 bird flu in 2013, which had 1,568 cases, the fatality rate was 39.30%. If you look at Ebola for Africa, for instance, where, you know, in 2014, there is Ebola currently ongoing in the Democratic Republic of Congo. There were 33,000 cases, 577 since 1976. The deaths were 13,562. Fatality rate was 40.4%. So when you compare with the fatality rate of coronavirus at 2.2%, the epidemic, yes, is a worry, but we have dealt with epidemics before. We have overcome them. Even in Africa, we overcame Ebola.
We overcame Ebola.
So yes, if there is anybody that is rightly put to deal with the current virus at a short notice, it is China. They have the capacity, they have the resources, you know, they have reacted very fast and effectively, and they've ensured that this hasn't actually, gone out of control. As we speak now, the virus is actually under control.
And I remember, you know, some people came out, Kenyans even coming out saying that because of coronavirus, we will all die. Some were saying that we will all die. But you're saying if you overcame Ebola, we can overcome even coronavirus. We won't all die.
We overcame Ebola with international support. We overcame Ebola with international solidarity. Africa was not on its own. And as we speak, the UN Secretary General, the World Health Organization, they've all said, stand in solidarity. I mean, it's a global world now, right? You know, if you look at the flights that go between Africa and China over the last 10 years alone, it has gone up 600%. There are so many more direct flights now to China than there were 10 years ago. So when you imagine if it's gone up 600%, and you imagine the number of people that are, you know, traversing the two continents, let alone the number of people that are traversing the entire world, because now we are in a globalized society, then you realize, you know, you're not alone. You cannot be alone. This is an epidemic that could affect anybody.
Global, in the global perspective.
Yes, global
but you know, some countries halted their flights and said, no, we are not taking anyone to or from China for some countries. But you know, the question can be, was quarantine or is quarantine the best way, you know, to prevent more infections from occurring?
You see, let's first start from the perspective that this was a new virus. So nobody quite knew what it's all about. And once the Chinese authorities understood what it was about, it was the best way, one of the best ways to try and manage it within the area, the epicenter of it. The World Health Organization, however, has said that there is no need to restrict travel around the world. There is no need.
There is no need.
There is no need to restrict.
It creates unnecessary panic.
Yes, it creates unnecessary panic. This is now an epidemic that is under control, so there is no need for to stop, you know, travel. Because everybody now knows what this is about, what the epidemic is about. If you look at Africa, for instance, Ethiopian Airlines is still flying to China, 5 regions in China daily, actually. So that business is still ongoing. And, you know, African countries have actually shown a lot of solidarity. Kenya Airways, for a start, it took some masks and some other facilities and some other supplies, actually most people don't know this, to China to assist the people of Wuhan. South Africa as well did the same. Other African countries have shown solidarity in their own ways. And even though there was a little bit of apprehension of what we are dealing with, the World Health Organization itself actually pointed out that there was a bit of concern about the health systems of weaker states, right? So even though the decision to you know, withdraw or to restrict travel is it's an individual country restriction, it's an individual country decision, the World Health Organization has said there really is no need for that.
I'm looking at what critics at some point were, saying. Some went out to hit the Chinese government of not being open in terms of sharing information. You are a global, media personality. Based on what you saw happening on the ground, with some, criticizing the Chinese government of not, sharing information, more so on the rate of infection and deaths. Is this well placed? Can we say that at some point we should have done better, or we should have expected anything less from what was seen on the ground?
Actually, that is not a well-placed criticism, because when the Chinese authorities realized what was going on, one of the first things they did was to inform the World Health Organization.
Yes.
On February the 10th, a team of World Health Organization delegation went to China on a fact-finding mission to see for themselves what is going on. So I don't think you can be more open than that. We have been having daily reports. We've been having daily updates. And as I mentioned to you, I have given you the figures, the latest figures, that have been coming to us daily. The health authorities have been giving us daily updates on the fatalities, on the number of people affected in China, outside of China. And, the government has been extremely open on this, because this is now a global epidemic. So everybody knows what needs to be done, how to do the testing at the ports of entry, at the ports of exit. So that criticism of that the government has not been open, the Chinese government has not been open, there is no validity to that remark at all.
Should we also mention issues to do with the public demanding to know more about what is happening in terms of the information that was even given by the media? Was there struggle in releasing or relaying information to the people with regards to this virus?
No, there was no struggle at all in terms of relaying this decision, because at the end of January, when this was discovered, it only took about 2 weeks or a week before everything, before the virus was actually confirmed what it was, and the Chinese authorities took control. And we at CGTN, we are state media, what we have been advising all media people across the continent, because our base here in Africa, what we've been telling African journalists and African broadcasters and anybody who wants information from China, we tell them, we want to facilitate you. We want you to be able to get the real story. So if you need any assistance in terms of, getting our correspondents inside Wuhan, in any of the provinces in China, if you want any information, we will assist you with the link so that you get the story yourself from the ground, as opposed to us telling you the story. So we've been telling all African broadcasters on the continent, if you need any assistance, if you need any contact, from us or in China, from medical personnel, from our correspondents on the ground, we'll facilitate the live link for you, so that you're able to get that information yourself, apart from the information that CGTN will be giving to you.
So it was open.
It is a very open and transparent process.
And I was looking at a tweet sent today, let's talk maybe midnight there today, from the World Health Organization. And I quote, WHO will report all coronavirus confirmed cases, including laboratory confirmed as previously reported and clinically diagnosed cases, currently only applicable to Hubei province, the hashtag China. So the World Health will report all corona confirmed cases as of now. That was the information that was sent today. But as we talk about information, because we talk about media, how we are covering it, what is the role of the media in containing this disease? And has the media in China, because CGTN is also based in China, has the media in China and other parts of the world been helpful in the coverage or in the reporting of this viral disease?
Let's first understand that this has been a new strain of a virus. So not much information was known about it, right? So there's a lot of research that needs to go into understanding what this is about. First point of call, we need to understand what it is so that we can tell our audiences exactly what it is, how to protect yourself, what authorities are doing to protect the population and so forth, right? But we also need to understand that we don't need to sensationalize. We don't need to do scaremongering is the word that I'm talking about. We need to rely on facts. We need to rely on research. We need to rely on scientific data. We need to rely on what the World Health Organization is telling us. We need to rely on what health authorities are telling us. Because let's take an example of the AIDS crisis in the 70s and 80s, right? When we stigmatized the people.
Really stigmatized.
They went underground, and what happened? The outbreak became even bigger. When we had Ebola in 2014 in West Africa, people got scared, they were stigmatized, they went underground, they got more contagious, and the outbreak became even bigger.
Did we do it, in the best way that we could as media practitioners?
We learned later on how to cover Ebola crisis. And because as a result of what happened with Ebola, if you realize that in parts of the DRC, the population did not understand how the Ebola virus was contagious, how it was being spread. So they started blaming the health professionals, which was wrong. So what I'm saying is that, we don't need to involve ourselves in scaremongering. We can deal with the facts. We can deal with the fatality rates. We can deal with the transparency of the process. We can be open about exactly what is being done to ensure that everybody understands the epidemic. Everybody understands that there are authorities working to ensure that the virus is brought under control. So as media professionals, let us deal with the facts. Let us deal with the scientific facts. Let us deal with what health professionals are telling us. I'm very gratified because when you look at what's been happening on the African continent, there's been very little scaremongering on the continent. One, because there has been no officially confirmed case of Ebola, of coronavirus in Africa, right? But also, when you look at the people on the continent who have been giving the press conferences, who've been updating the population on the continent, right? They have been ministers of health, they have been professionals from the World Health Organization. So in Africa, at least, there has been, the people are not as scared or they're not as apprehensive as they would have been if all we were relying on was misinformation. So that information has come to them through channels that has enabled the population to understand what we are dealing with.
And as you mentioned that, I remember when you're talking about the coverage of the H1N1 virus, a lot of panic was put, fear was instilled in people. When you look at coronavirus, comparing it with how we are doing it, do we say that right now we are more informed as, in the global perspective? Are we more informed on how we should be handling this, or do we need more, research that needs to be done, especially when it comes to, coverage of such events that can cause, a global panic?
On a positive note, the World Health Organization has been very forthcoming in updating. So if we don't understand as media what is happening, you can always refer to what the health professionals at the World Health Organization are saying. So there is research, there are continuous updates from Chinese authorities. So there is no lack of information, there is no vacuum in terms of information. If you want to do your research and you want to get the actual up-to-the-minute details of what is happening inside China, there are avenues. That information is out in the open. Also remember that this is the age of digital media.
That's where I was also coming. The age of digital media, we have lots of information that is coming in
up to date.
Up to date, and people have so much, so many gadgets outside there. They record, they even type, they go on there. The bloggers go. The World Health Organization decided, as I said earlier, they say that they will confirm all cases. But what does this mean, especially for media practitioners, if, when the World Health Organization is the one that confirms all cases? Does it mean that at some point there are some loopholes that need to be filled?
I cannot answer that question, but if there are loopholes or not. But the World Health Organization is looking at this on behalf of the global community.
Yes.
So we take their word that what they have found is what is on the ground. If the World Health Organization says, well, there really is no need for travel restrictions, then so be it, right?
But the media needs to be well up to date with information that is going on, especially when we do reports.
That is true, because I've also pointed out that there are multiple platforms that you can get that information. You can get that information from WHO, you can get that information from Chinese health authorities, you can get that information from your own domestic Ministry of Health authorities. You can get that information, for instance, in Kenya, you can get that information from KEMRI, these research institutions. So there are multiple sources of information that you can get the correct information. What I'm just saying is, let us not speculate, right? We have all these platforms where we can get the correct information. Why do we need to speculate? There is no need for speculation.
I love that. You know, don't speculate, especially as a nation. Don't speculate. Information is there that you can be able to get that is coming, especially from the World Health Organization and many other entities. But let's look at China. How has this affected the economic stability of the Chinese as we know it, as of now, the economic growth of China?
Chinese authorities have said that this is not going to affect global growth at all. It is not going to affect China's domestic growth as well. And even us in Africa, we have been talking to business people. I spoke to the executive secretary of the UN Economic Commission for Africa, and she said, well, the situation is China is Africa's largest trade partner. So if China's growth rate is affected, Africa's growth rate is affected. But because this epidemic happened during the Chinese Spring Festival, which is the holiday season. After the holiday season, much of China is getting on with business as usual. Life is going back as normal in many other parts of China. We need to understand that the epicenter of the epidemic is Wuhan in Hubei province. So the rest of China is actually business is ongoing, and we hope that in the next few weeks, any apprehension that there was, particularly on the African continent, with our businesses, considering our trade business with China, hopefully that will be back to normal. But also, let me just point out to you that a lot of business now is conducted online. Right? There's quite a large chunk of business that is conducted online. In Kenya, for instance, online business through Kilimall, through Alipay, that is going on business as usual. That has not stopped. So pretty much the Chinese authorities have said it is not going to affect global growth. It is not going to affect domestic growth in China. So as we sit here in Africa, we are proceeding as business as usual.
And you've talked about business coming in from the business community, in the business perspective, as as an entrepreneur. Let's talk about, for example, in Kenya, we have our own imports that are there. We import merchandise from China, or the Chinese who visit Kenya, even as tourists. What is the impact of this virus on business and the people, in terms of people-to-people relations? Because at some point, yes, a person will have contact with another as we conduct business.
All right. So you mentioned the contact aspect of it, yeah? So I want to take you to what I have seen in Kenyan airports and in other African airports. I also just came back from Ethiopia, so I saw this as well in Ethiopian airports. There's also always that concern that perhaps the flights that are coming in from China are not, that our ports of entry are not well guarded. They don't have the capacity. But let me tell you, Africa has had a history of dealing with Ebola. We already had the facilities that we were using for Ebola at the airports. So in terms of temperature checks, that facility was already there. Now, in terms of the testing for the coronavirus at our ports, we only had 2 laboratories. Up until this week, actually, we only had 1 laboratory in Senegal and 1 laboratory in South Africa. But we have moved fast as a continent with the assistance of China, with the assistance of the World Health Organization. We now have, as of this week, we have a laboratory in Ghana, Madagascar, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, and Ethiopia. They've also announced that they are able now to conduct the test. WHO is also sending kits to 29 laboratories on the continent to ensure they have the capacity. China is also has released some $80 million to fund a Center for Disease Control in Ethiopia to enable us to have that capacity. So when you look at, when you talk about the contacts, the people-to-people contact, anybody who comes in from China, right, already goes through thorough testing at their port of exit. At our port of entry, we already have the temperature scans in all airports across the continent, right? Because we were already testing for Ebola. So that was already in place. Now we have this added capacity that has been given to us by WHO and by the Chinese authorities. So when you look at it, really, there shouldn't be much worry that we don't really have the capacity 100%. Now, even when you talk about Kenya, right?
Yeah.
The health ministry had indicated that they had already set up a quarantine facility in the event that anybody, you know, was thought to have the coronavirus. In other countries as well, that has been set up. So on the continent, the capacity is building up. Even though we had concerns about the health status of weaker states, the capacity is now building up to ensure that, you know, that we are able to deal with this. Just to point out that, yes, we have about 1.5 million Chinese tourists that visit Africa annually. We also have about 10,000 Chinese enterprises, right, that operate in the African continent. When you talk about 10,000 Chinese enterprises, they're not all shutting down.
Yeah.
So it is business as usual
Yes.
on the continent when it comes to doing business with China.
So we can say it's all good.
It's all good.
But, you know, I'm looking at also some get concerned, you know, when they do business, Alibaba, AliExpress, they get worried whether it will be of concern to them. But I'm looking at other countries that have been able to take some stringent measures. Talk about Morocco, talk about Algeria, that have, you know, that have evacuated their citizens from China. What impact of such evacuations does this have on the Chinese government? And as a nation, what does it say about us as Kenya? And, you know, is the Chinese government able to take care of, you know, those who are already in Africa, in China, the Africans that are already dwelling in China? Do they need to be evacuated, or is it all okay?
So the Chinese government gives 50,000 scholarships to African students annually. That number has been progressively rising during every other 3 years, right? So there are thousands of African students that are in China. I'll give you the example of one Cameroonian student, the first student, that was infected with coronavirus.
Right now he's doing well.
The student was treated in China. He took himself to hospital. He was treated. He has been cured, and he's, you know, continuing with his business in China. So in terms of, are there concerns that the African students or the African business people that are in China, that they may not be looked after? There is no validity to that concern at all, based on the situation of that one Cameroonian student, right? He went to hospital, he was treated, he recovered, he went on with his life.
So if it's possible for him, it can also be possible for many more people.
Well, it is possible for everybody. The Chinese authorities are taking very keen measures to ensure that every single person is taken care of. If you feel that you have the coronavirus, or if you're detected to have the coronavirus, every single person, regardless of race, is being taken care of. And that is why they're releasing also the figures of the foreigners who have contracted the disease. So they are capable of taking care of everybody.
You know, it makes me wonder, how prepared are we? You know, let's talk about Kenya. Let's talk about Africa as a continent. How prepared are we in dealing with, you know, the case? Because and how many coronavirus testing labs do we have in Africa that are there, that already that have been set up? And even as we talk about Kenya, do we have one?
I don't know about the case of Kenya, but I just pointed out that, yes, up until you know, early this month, we only had 2 testing centers, one in Senegal and one in South Africa. They were, you know, testing all the, you know, the viruses that were sent to them. But now we have Ghana, we have Madagascar, we have Nigeria, we have Sierra Leone, we have Ethiopia, we have 7 testing centers across the continent and growing. By the end of the month, and I'm talking about by the end of February, we expect to have at least 36 African countries with the capabilities to test. So yes, this is a new virus. So we are building up the capacity as we go. We have the assistance of the World Health Organization. So apart from the 36 African countries that we expect to already be equipped with the facilities to test for the coronavirus, we also have the 29 laboratories that the World Health Organization is sending kits to enable, right, to enable the continent to test. And this is all happening within the span of 6 weeks. So yes, the continent is gradually, you know, getting the capacity to ensure that it is also able to carry out the tests.
I'm aware that they are working on a vaccine, and the World Health Organization said that it will take around 18 months for it to be made, you know, publicly available. So as they're doing that, does this mean that, you know, there is light at the end of the tunnel?
There is a lot of light at the end of the tunnel in terms of a vaccine. I'm no expert, but we know and we understand that there are other medications that are on trial basis on people. So there is light at the end of the tunnel in terms of are we going to find a vaccine or not, yes.
So at least there is hope.
There is hope.
I like that.
Just to point out, though,
yes.
that as I talk about there is hope, there were some 300 scientists that met in Geneva, and they are they are doing ongoing research on the coronavirus. So yes, the world has come together to ensure that this is really brought under control.
We have a city like Wuhan. When should we expect this lockdown to end?
So Wuhan is a city of 11 million people, right? It is virtually now on a lockdown. We expect the lockdown to end when Chinese health authorities deem it safe, not just for Chinese population, but also deem it safe for the entire world, that the epidemic has finally been brought under control. Then that time is when we expect that the lockdown will be uplifted.
Now, I'm looking at relations between Kenya and China. It has been growing in the recent past. We've had lots of activities, you know, coming in from Kenya, from China, to Kenya, to China. But which new areas of investments or opportunities does Kenya have that we can take advantage of as of now, in terms of, you know, the relations between Kenya and China?
All right. So the relationship between China and Kenya and the relationship between China and Africa, let's say, has been growing over the last decade, particularly. You know, we've seen a lot of infrastructural development ongoing, not just in Kenya, but also across the continent. We've seen China investing heavily in roads, in railways, and the Chinese dream, which they've always pointed out, is to connect Africa by rail, by road, by air, from Cape Town to Cairo in under 10 years.
Yes.
Yeah, we are seeing that happening. We've seen the SGR, which is the entry point of the Maritime Silk Road, which is what we call the Belt and Road Initiative, and that was supposed to come through Mombasa, connect 5 East African countries, then onward, move on to Central Africa, move on down to Southern Africa, and move on to West and North Africa. West Africa is also setting up its own similar infrastructure, which will then connect with the Central African region and on to East Africa. So you can see that there is a lot of business ongoing. There's a lot of investment from China ongoing right now in African countries, right?
So this will not affect the relationship between Kenya and China.
No,
you know, Kenya is the leading destination for China.
It will not affect the relationship. But what I wanted to mention to you, of course, is that 2 years ago, during the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, Africa was given about $60 billion by China, right, to invest in areas of agriculture, skills transfer, and that is where the 50,000 scholarships, annual scholarships, come up, to invest in areas of industrialization, right? So there are very many areas that Kenya and Africa can take advantage of. The issue of technology, you know, China is very big on technology. Those are other areas that Africa can take advantage of. Now, China has also opened its export market to African countries, right? Has opened its export market. And through the CFTA, the free trade arrangement that Africa has come up with, African countries can take advantage of that huge market. I know Kenya is taking advantage of that in terms of its agricultural produce that is now taking to China.
And speaking of taking advantage, do you see as taking advantage of an event like this, this eventuality? Yes, it is a sad thing that is happening, especially for China and the world at large. But should we take advantage of such a thing to learn from it as Africa? Because we are talking about third world countries. If such a thing would happen in any country in Africa, would we have been so efficient to the point that we build all those facilities within that short period of time? How advantageous can it be for us as Africa or as Kenya to take advantage of something like this that's happening in China?
There are lessons to be learned.
Yeah.
And we've seen that. The World Health Organization itself said that China was setting the standards in response measures. Those are some of the things that Africa can take lessons from and can take cues from, right? In terms of how we reacted to Ebola, right? Did we react fast enough? In terms of how we are reacting to Ebola in the DRC, are we reacting fast enough?
Some say we are not.
Are we setting? Are we learning our lessons and putting sorting out our health institutions? Are we putting the right amount of funding into our health institutions? Are we building the capacities? Because this virus is global. Viruses are global. It is not just a virus for one community or one people. We should avoid that stigmatization, right? Because when we had Ebola, the world came in solidarity with us. Did we set up our institutions to ensure that that doesn't happen again? Are we fixing our health institutions now to ensure that in the event that something like this happens to our continent, we are able to react? Do we know that we have the friends, the international solidarity to assist us through this? Those are some of the questions that probably the continent could be answering.
And we don't need to segregate ourselves that because it's happening in China, it is their problem. It should be our problem also because we are a global family or a global world.
Yes, and on that note as well, African countries have come up really in solidarity with China. I did mention Kenya Airways flying supplies. I also mentioned South Africa flying in supplies. A lot of African presidents have shown their solidarity and have spoken vocally of their support to China during this epidemic. This is not just an epidemic for one community or for one continent or for one region. This is a global epidemic.
Our final question, as we bring this discussion to a close, can coronavirus be treated in any hospital?
Going by China's lesson, we have seen that it is curable and it is controllable. And it is, yes, it is treatable. I have just given you the example of the Cameroonian student, and also looking at the survival rate. If I can just go back to that figure, the survivors, total survivors so far are 12,552. So yes, it is curable, it is treatable, right? So we know now that the incubation period is about 14 days, 11 to 14 days. We know that, if you have the flu, there are certain things that you need to do. You need to drink a lot of fluids, you need to cover your mouth when you sneeze. And basically, we understand, I'm not an expert, but we understand from health professionals that if your immune system is strong, you will recover. So yes, going by the survival rate of 12,552, this virus is curable. This virus can be brought under control. And if you take the right measures to protect yourself, you will not get it.
All right. That is Beatrice Marshal. Thank you very much for joining me this morning. She is a global anchor and journalist from the China Global Television Network, CGTN, giving us her view, her perspective on issues or matters concerning the coronavirus. Well, that brings us to the end of this morning conversation. It brings us to the end of Good Morning Kenya. See you again tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Remember, as we talk about coronavirus, make sure that you get information from the right sources and let us avoid panic. God bless you. God bless the work of your hands. My name is Ram Maguko. See you again tomorrow morning. Keep it KBC.